So I've been hearing a lot about this TotalBoat Epoxy, and they very kindly sent me some several months back. I've been testing it quite extensively. As you can see by the state of the containers, this stuff has been on the road with me, it's been in the workshop with me, and I've put it through its paces in a number of different projects. We have replanked the side of a cold molded Chris Craft using this epoxy. I have used it to repair the bottom of a 1969 offshore race boat. I've also used this to install the trim tabs on that same race boat, and then just last weekend we raced that round the Isle of Wight in some pretty rough conditions, so I have definitely put this stuff through its paces. So in this video I'm going to do an introduction to the TotalBoat High Performance Epoxy range. So we'll take a look through the basic range, I'll tell you a little bit about it and its performance and how to use it, and we'll see some examples of that a little bit later on in the video. We'll also take a look at some of its physical properties so that we know exactly what we can do with this. I know that data sheets are boring, so what I'm going to do is break those down so that you can pick out the key figures from that data sheet and you know exactly what you need to know about this product and how it's going to perform. We'll do some mixing and application trials so that you can actually see this stuff being used, and I will tell you what I do and don't like about it after having used this for the last couple of months. So let's get started on the video. So likes and dislikes, there is one immediate thing that we're going to notice with this epoxy, and that is it's non-blushing. Amine blush is quite a pain with epoxy and it can cause problems if it's not properly dealt with. I have done videos before that show you how to deal with amine blush, but with this epoxy we have a non-blushing formula, which means that is largely not a consideration anymore. With this epoxy we have a pump set, and that goes into the top of the containers and dispenses the correct volume of epoxy for the resin and hardener so that we get an accurate blend of the two. That's a very important thing to do when mixing epoxy. The good thing that I have found with this epoxy is that because it's all a 2-to-1 ratio across all of the hardeners, that makes them interchangeable. So you can use one pump of the medium and one pump of the fast. The third thing that I've really liked and enjoyed about using this is that the fast hardener is very fast. This can begin to tack up in around an hour or so depending on temperature conditions, and we'll look at what those are for each of the hardeners in just a minute. But the fast epoxy allows you to actually bond something up and work on it same day. If you do that in the morning, you can work on it by the end of the day, and that's a really good blessing for when you're trying to get things moved forwards. Things that I like, number 4, is that the slow and the medium hardeners are pure clear. The fast hardener is pretty clear and it's got a slight amber haze to it, but it means that it's not going to discolor things. So if you're doing things like carbon work, you might want a nice clear color to that. And obviously I do a lot of woodwork, so it's also good for that without discoloring the things that you are working on. Like number 5 is actually not from the epoxy, it's from the mixing pots that I got with them. Now this might seem very trivial and you might think, what's a mixing pot really got to do with things? But do you know what I've noticed with the TotalBoat mixing pots is that they are just right, and that really makes the workflow great. We've got a range of different size of mixing pots from this. First thing I really noticed is that they're incredibly tough. That allows you to break all of the cured epoxy out of them and use them again. So as you can see, these have been used many times over, and they are still going strong. So that's really good. It means you're not constantly splitting them when you're cracking the epoxy out and throwing them away. The size of them has also been really well thought about. The two really big ones, you're probably going to use these for things like paint or really big mixing scenarios, which I haven't yet got around to. But these 3 smaller sized ones are probably the ones that I have used a huge amount. Little pots for simple, small couple of pump mix-ups. I use them all the time. They're also good just to have a brush stood in acetone if you want to keep that from curing whilst you're doing other stuff. I've used these just for doing wet out on joints quite a lot with the unthickened epoxy mix. These next ones are really good as well because they're a larger cup, but they're also very shallow, which is good for a short mixing stick. You can get in there without being too deep down inside the cup. And then when we get to bigger stuff, obviously this is more typical of the type of thing that I will use for a big mix or glue up. Okay, so that's my likes. What about my dislikes? To be honest, there's only one thing that I've found that I don't particularly like about this epoxy, and that is that I've noticed that in cooler conditions, the resin in particular is quite difficult to dispense from the pump. That's basically because the viscosity of the epoxy gets thicker in cooler conditions, and it takes quite a long time for that pump to come back up. It also takes a reasonable amount of force to get it down in the first place. And that can slow you down a little bit when you're trying to crack on with the job and it's a little bit chilly, which sometimes it can be, especially in the UK. It's not a difficult fix though. All you got to do is just make sure that that epoxy is kept nice and warm. So I tend to just run a little fan over that, keep it slightly heated when conditions are cooler in the shop. Other than that, it's a pretty damn cool product. So let's get some mixed up and we'll see it in use in a couple of different applications. Okay, so I've got a couple of tests set up here. I've got a piece of cedar and I'm gonna laminate a bit of carbon over the top of that. I thought that'd be a really good illustration of the differences between the colors. And then I got a piece of mahogany as well, which we're gonna clear coat with the epoxy. I'm gonna do that with each 3 hardener combinations and we'll see how the 3 of them fare. So let's start and get some mixed up. Now I've had the fan running for a little while just to warm this epoxy up, and you can see immediately how much easier that is to dispense versus when I did the pump earlier and things were a little bit cold. So as I said, it's a pretty simple fix really. Just make sure that epoxy is nice and warm and it's going to dispense beautifully. So I will do the slow hardener first of all. As with all epoxy products, mixing thoroughly is really important, so we want to make sure that we're scraping around the outside of that pot and mixing the 2 components together really thoroughly. Okay, so you can see we've got a nice, clear, low viscosity epoxy with the resin and slow hardener combination. So I'm going to brush some of that out on the cedar. Then I'll just lay my bit of carbon in place. Then I can fill out the rest of that weave. Also brush some on the mahogany to see what our colour's like for clear coating. So I'll go over to the medium hardener next. And you can see again that we've got a pure, clear, low viscosity epoxy with that hardener. Okay, and lastly, let's get on to the fast hardener. You might be able to see that there's an ever so slightly yellow tinge to the fast hardener, but it is still pretty clear, just as the other 2 are. And that's what we're looking at when it's mixed. So there's an initial look at our coatings across all 3 hardeners and a little bit of carbon stuff done as well. You can see that we've got a really clear coating and next to no colour difference between those, even with the slight amberness that you see with the fast hardener. You can just about pick it up in the pot there, but hardly anything at all. And that's really good even if you're not doing coating applications. You still might want to maintain uniform wood colour throughout bonding, and if you can avoid discoloration, that clear finish is really good. So I'm definitely a fan of that. And we have no amine blush on the surface, which is an absolute blessing. And that means that we could move straight on to abrading that for further clear coating or painting over the top of this surface. Okay, so there are some key datasheet facts that you really should know. I would encourage you to read the datasheet for any product that you're ever using, and the TotalBoat Epoxy has a really good sheet with all of the key information you need, plus a load of troubleshooting guides on there as well. So I do recommend that you read it, but if you don't want to take the time to do that, which some of you probably won't, I'll just pick out the key things right now that you really should know. Mix ratio is a very important one, and this is probably one of the main reasons that epoxy won't cure properly if you get this wrong. The mix ratio for this epoxy is 2:1 by volume, and that is best done with these integrated pump sets. Remember that that is done by one full cycle of each pump, and that will dispense the correct volume to get a 2:1 ratio. You can also mix larger volumes by weight using the graduated scale on the side of the TotalBoat mixing pots. You can also do this by weight, and that is 100 to 45, which is a little more difficult, but if you're using scales or you're working in large volumes where you don't want to use the pump sets, mixing by weight is a really good way to do it. There are 4 drying or curing stages with this epoxy that you should probably take notice of. Gel time is the time in which this is realistically going to be usable within your mixing pot. That's going to reduce if you've got a larger volume of epoxy, so try and get that out of a big cup and into something like a large roller tray, which is going to give you more gel time. Tack free time is going to be the next time that follows on from that, and that's going to be when this epoxy then starts to lose its surface tack. That's an important time to remember when it comes to overcoating. You want to get your second coat on before that tack free time has elapsed. Minimum cure time is the minimum amount of time that you want to leave this before you start to release clamps. This is going to be a little bit longer if you've got a particular amount of tension in the wood, and I would recommend in that case waiting for a full cure before you release the clamps. But in instances where you might be able to lightly handle the part or just take off clamps that aren't doing a huge amount of work, the minimum clamp time is going to be a good one to remember. And full cure time is going to be when this epoxy reaches its full strength. These times are going to come down when temperatures go up, and they're going to get longer when temperatures get cooler. But they're listed in the datasheet with average temperatures of 25 degrees C or 77 F. Tensile elongation is the next property that will be really useful for you to know about. That varies from 6.7% with the slow hardener up to 7.5% with the fast hardener. Quite simply put, that is how stretchy the epoxy is. This is how much the epoxy is able to stretch before you're going to start to see a failure. For example, at 7.5%, a 100 mm wide piece of wood would have to expand to 107.5 millimeters before you're likely to start to see a failure on that surface. Consider that where this is most likely is going to be within joints, where you may have even a millimeter wide joint between planks on a boat. If you've coated over that, you can only expand that 1 millimeter to 1.075 millimeters before you can see a failure there. So it's very important within epoxy work to make sure that our surfaces and substrates are dimensionally stable, and we'll cover that in another video. TG is something else that you will see on a datasheet with epoxies, and this is a really important thing to consider. TG stands for glass transition temperature. It's the temperature at which the cured epoxy changes from a hard, glassy, rigid material into a softer, more flexible or rubber-like state. This is not its melting point, but it is something slightly different to that. Below the TG, the epoxy maintains its maximum stiffness, strength, and dimensional stability. Above the TG, the material begins to lose rigidity and can deform more easily under load or heat. TG is one of the most important performance properties of an epoxy system because it basically determines the upper temperature range where the material can reliably perform. And the TG for this epoxy is 55 degrees C or 132 F.
Okay, so that is the TotalBoat High Performance Epoxy range. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see any more videos using the TotalBoat stuff. We've got plans to do a handful of different quick guides that show you guys how to use this product in more specific applications. And I've got some ideas for that, but if there's anything you really want to see in particular, let me know in the comments below and I'll see if I can make that happen. On top of that, there are loads of other products in the TotalBoat range, and we may well be doing some more videos diving deep into those as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Hope you found this useful, and let me know in the comments below if you've used TotalBoat before and how you've got on with it. I think it's a really great product, and hopefully this was a good little starter insight into using it more in the future. Cheers, guys.